Okay, so we got the upper intake off. We're going to go ahead and continue getting this lower intake off. Now if you notice on this intake, something else we discovered while we're in here, there is dirty air intake, dirty, nice and clean. You want to look at these and inspect these. If that one's all nice and clean, there's typically something wrong. These should all be the same. These should all be pretty dirty and black. Since that's so clean, that means something's most likely leaking into that. Usually when it's clean like that, it can be fuel or coolant. It could be leaking right here. This is a coolant passage. It could be leaking right here into here, and a lot of coolant going down into the engine. Surprising we haven't noticed that. That's also a problem with these intakes. They leak internally, not just externally, but they can leak coolant internally. So it's very likely it's either leaking right here. Since we're putting a brand new intake on with a new intake manifold gasket, it's going to correct that problem. But take a look, because that could be some other problem your customer was having, and if you let them know about it, you're going to make with the same job, you're going to fix something else. So we're going to go ahead and start removing this entire lower intake. There is some coolant hoses we need to get to, and we're going to really need to get this alternator out of the way. So we're going to pop that off first. To get that off, there's a bolt here. There's a bolt here, and then there's another electrical connector right here. This little thing pops right off. Just squeeze it with your fingers and it'll pull right off. It just snaps on there. Set that aside. This bolt has to come off. This bolt, this bracket, and that bolt. So let's go ahead and start. Removing these. Yeah, the alternator should basically just lift right out. Make sure there's no other wires connected to it. Get everything out of your way. Lifts right out. Now we can get to these. We might have to move the power steering bracket out of the way. We mainly want to be able to get to this little coolant bypass right here, which we can get to. And there's another one down here, which we can also get to. So this hose isn't looking so good. We're going to go ahead and replace that. So let's go ahead and start popping that off. And then we got almost everything out of the way to start pulling this intake off. There's a bolt there. We need to all the hold down bolts. Look closely at them. And we're going to need to take this upper hose off. We're going to replace this upper hose anyway. We're going to replace the thermostat anyway. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect that. This upper hose, this is an original hose. Again, this car's from 1995. So look at your car closely. You can pop your hood and look at your hoses and things, and if you see a clamp like this is a spring type clamp. General Motors uses these from the factory on pretty much every single one of their vehicles. If you still have these clamps on there, then most likely you have the original hoses, or someone changed your hoses and left these old clamps on here. These aren't the best clamps to keep on there. They're spring loaded, they do wear out. Down here in Florida, where it's very hot most of the year, we go through a lot of cooling problems. Hoses, thermostats, radiators, hoses that pop off. So don't chintz out and save a buck on a clamp. Put new hoses on and put brand new clamps on. You'll save yourself some headache in the long run. So let's go ahead and pull this lower intake off. Get these last two little bypass tubes off here. Now there's going to be coolant in here. Once I get it a little bit loose, you can see it kind of turn, so I'm going to pull it the rest of the way off. Oftentimes the littlest parts are the hardest and most time consuming. But we got it off. We're certainly not going to put this hose back on. This is a perfect example how a hose fails. It fails from the inside out. Now this little tiny hose, you can't even see it without the intake off. If you look close at it, it's normal size. Right here where the clamp is, it's all bulged up. This hose was a problem waiting to happen. You can see where it's bulged up right there. And also right here. That would eventually leaked, probably on the road, and you'd have been stuck somewhere with a pretty big repair once it's towed and all that. So we're going to put a brand new one on, put new clamps on, so that this doesn't have a problem. And this hooks right into this little fitting here. These are common to cause problems. This one, there's also another one right behind it. These are problem areas, so you want to look at these really closely. This has a little teeny hold down bolt. to get it off of. You probably can't see it on camera very well, but I need to either get it loose there, or I can take it loose down here where this clamp is. There's a bolt, an extra bolt, and then you got to feed it out. So because of that, I'm going to take it off down here where that bolt is. That way I can pull it out of the way. I may end up taking it off back here also, just to get enough leverage to move it away from the intake. Okay, so we got the upper intake off. We've removed all the bolts that attach the lower intake to the cylinder heads and to the engine block. So we removed all the way around all the bolts. Now we got these two thermostat housing bolts we're going to remove. We removed the hose already. We just pulled the clamp back, pulled the hose off. Now we're going to remove these two bolts. We don't need to remove these to get the intake out, but it's a lot easier now that the intake's held in place. We can pop these bolts off just to get this thermostat housing off. Then we've got everything loose to start pulling on this lower intake and get it loose. So let me finish these up. And okay, here's a good example. Remember where I said there's a short bolt and a long bolt? Well, this is a perfect example. If you don't put these bolts back in the right place, you're going to strip one of them, and that turns into a much bigger of a job. This thermostat housing just lifts right off. What's left of the gaskets there. There's the thermostat. We'll get that out of there. It basically just lifts right out, and we'll take a look at that. But remember where these bolts go. It's fairly obvious if you look at this. Obviously the long one goes up here, the short one goes right there. But just be aware of it so you don't put the bolts in the wrong place. Okay, once you get all the bolts out, you can take a rubber mallet, tap on it. You can take a regular mallet and tap on it, but this is aluminum, so be real careful. You can distort it real easy. Once you tap it a little bit, it'll pop right loose, and you can basically just lift it the rest of the way off. Now I have that one hose still connected, so I'm going to have to kind of play with it to get it off.